Well, if you've traveled to Pennsylvania lately, where we filmed this program, you'll have noticed a new welcome sign and a new state slogan. Welcome to Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. But below the slogan is a date, 1681, nearly 100 years before America's birthday of 1776. What happened in 1681 is a story almost as good, some would argue better, than the story of America's founding. It's a great story, and I have a special person here to share it, so you're not going to want to miss a minute. Stay with us. Every town, city, or even country has a DNA of sorts, a story or of origins explaining why someone decided a certain location on the planet was the ideal place to start a community. The story of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is a page-turner of a story, but few of us know the backstory. Today's guest has released a beautiful documentary film providing an extraordinary window on William Penn and the place he founded. Watch this.
Once in 100 lifetimes, someone steps onto the scene and changes the course of human history.
There's something about the fact that he's up there on City Hall, and yet he's a figure no one knows well.
There would be no liberty as we know it if it weren't for people like William Penn, who are shaped by the biblical ideal that men and women are made in the image of God.
When he was at Oxford University, a light came into the room, and he heard a voice that he believed was God speaking to him. And the voice said, "He shall build my city, and he shall set my captives free."
Penn's experience led him to see what was really needed was a safe haven for people.
So Pennsylvania was not just another colony. William Penn said that God might make this a seed of a nation, and he really meant the seed of world peace.
They were so amazed that Penn got this vision from God and saying, that's what we want to follow.
I truly believe that William Penn knew that we were indigenous to this land, that we were here first, and he respected our people for our knowledge of how we live.
I think William Penn still inspires us to understand the real significance of what it takes to make peace.
And in that, he was way ahead of his time.
Dr. Abildness, I can't think of anyone writing a script like this. This is an extraordinary story, and best of all, it's true. When did you first meet William Penn, and when did you decide the story needed to be told?
Well, it's an honor to be here and tell this story, because I believe this is part of the history and destiny of Pennsylvania. And so I had been praying with legislators for probably 20 years at the Capitol. And I would walk around and I would see on the walls of the Capitol, it was like hidden in plain sight, the message of the history and the destiny of what William Penn planted. And it just started to stir in me so much that I decided, I'm just going to offer some Capitol tours for people to learn this. Finally, I got asked to have a Capitol tour for the legislators. And the legislators didn't know what was on the walls. And it was very impacting as people found out about this. And so about 6 years ago, I decided I need to tell this story. And I spent 5 years in the production part of the story to get every part of it. So I guess 6 years ago, I decided this has to be told on film.
Yeah, that's a great thing. It's wonderful. I mean, everybody knows the name William Penn, but so few know his story. Can you tell our viewers a little bit, a thumbnail about William Penn? Because he wasn't like a poor British kid. I mean, he was a kid that came from privilege.
That's right. That's right. So his father was Admiral William Penn, and he was a confidant of King Charles II. So he wanted to raise his son, young William, to be in the king's court. And so he did everything to have him be a royal in a sense. And so Penn, he lived that, but he really cared for the people. And he had an experience when he actually went to Oxford University, where he was sent there 16 years old to learn to be a royal, but he had an experience of a light coming into the room and a vision that he thought that he heard God's voice saying to him, "He shall build my city and he shall set the captives free." And that was the beginning of him getting seared into his conscience what he thought God put a seal of divinity upon him. And he went out to the streets. He went to care for the people, to help to set the people free in a sense. Well, he ended up in prison. He ended up being arrested for out there speaking in the streets. All these people, the local people, were just gathering around to hear all that he had to say, and that became a concern to the king. He's talking about another kingdom. You know, what is this? Is he a threat to my kingdom? And so he ended up in prison, but his father had, he's trying to groom him to be royalty. His father is not going for this, and he started to say, he called him in actually, and he said, William, you need to get away from these Quakers who had met in the streets and all these believers gathering in the streets. You have to get away from those simple folk, and you need to be like a royal. And Penn said, I can't do that. I have in my conscience something that God spoke to me. I have to live by that. And his father then cast him out he tried to disown him from the funds that the family had. And so Penn, by what was in his conscience, decided he was going to follow the legacy that God put in his heart, and even no matter what the cost, no matter what he would have to lose, even with the great sad thing that he would be cast out of his family and the family funds. But he cared more about the legacy than what all he could get with the royalty. So he was unusual here he goes in the Tower of London, and they didn't know what to do with him because it was plain folk that generally they were prisoners of conscience, prisoners of what they believed. And so he would go in there and he would visit with the other prisoners who were different believers of different faiths that wanted to have freedom of expression. Many of them would lose their lives. They would be beheaded in the prison. But they didn't know what to do with young Penn because of his father's stance. And so he got a little bit more favor, but he sat in that prison and he actually wrote No Cross, No Crown, his most famous work, that you have no business ruling with the crown, leading the people, kind of controlling what the people need to do. And the way you need to lead is by the way of the humble way of the cross, to serve the needs of the people. And that's how he lived his life, and it was evident with every step along the way.
It's amazing, most people, for many of us in this day and age who call ourselves Christian, the price of following Jesus is not, it doesn't exact much of us. As a matter of fact, people admire us if we go to church regularly, right, and if we belong. People think well of you in our society. But William Penn paid a huge price.
Right, he did.
I mean, to follow God's voice and calling on his life, and right, to do what the Spirit of God in him told him to do. I mean, he could have just been comfortable and said, you know what, being a royal is a lot easier, a lot more comfortable. Let me do that. That I can do. Let me figure out what I need to do. I can do that. Mm-hmm. I get to take advantage of the family funds. I can live a very nice, comfortable life, a royal life. But instead, he rejects all that. How does he get to the United States?
Well, he rejected that because he saw how the people were being controlled by the monarch. And so after a while, he realized they were being so persecuted. It was in a culture that was persecuting them for what they believed, and he knew that he had to set the captives free, and that was the believers were the captives. And so he realized after a while, this isn't working in this culture. It's against people's faith, and it was actually because the king said you have to go to the Anglican church, nothing else. So it was the church of the state, but the believers of other faiths didn't have any rights, and he, after a while, said it's not working here. He actually wanted to get out of there and go to where he could fulfill what God told him to do. And so he actually went to the king and he asked for land somewhere else. And the king was pretty happy to get rid of him because he felt he was threatening his kingdom. And so they came up with an agreement that he could have the land across the ocean, far away from England. He could take all of his people that were gathering in the streets and maybe threatening, he thought, his kingdom. So he asked for the land. And so the interesting thing is his father passed away while he was in prison. And so now the king owed him all these funds that his father had given to the king, and he was going to give him, the king was worried, I'm going to give too much power to him. I'd be happy to get him out of here and give him this land. So he gives them his land grant to, in America. But then he says to Penn, you can have this land, but there are savages living in the land. There are Indians there, and they're going to kill you. You're going to need a whole army to protect you. And then young Penn said, they're not savages. The reason that they're killing the British is because the British are killing them to take their land. And he said, I'm going to do it different. And there's a quote that he began that is a hallmark of his life. Let's see what love will do. So that's a good quote for what are you going to do with...
Let's see what love will do.
Well, love will do. Well, try that with your enemies. Let's see what love will do. And so he decided and told the king, I'm going to love them. I'm going to learn their language. I'm going to buy the land from the Indian chiefs that you just granted to me. So he bought it from 3 different Lenape chiefs. He bought the land. He befriended them. He learned their language. He loved them so much that he said, when someone knows that you love them, they're not going to harm you. They're not going to harm the ones that live in love towards them. And so he started what he would then call Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. He started a loving relationship with the first natives that he met, and it turns out he did his Penn Peace Treaty with them, which was partly a collective of land grant agreements, but he did a proclamation with them of a peace treaty that he said to them, in the broad pathway of life, we will live in good faith and goodwill. No advantage will be taken by one side or the other, and no harm will come to the other. It's as though we're one blood. It's as though we're one man. So he's bringing together the different nationalities coming as one, and he says, no harm will come. We will live together in love. The Lenape chief responds to him, and this is the peace treaty that becomes a model of peace treaties between nations. The Lenape chief says, we will live in love with William Penn and his family as long as the stars are in the sky and until the rivers run dry. So to the Lenape, that meant every generation. We're making a promise to you that will be for every generation. And I've met Lenapes today, and they still say, we kept that treaty every generation. We still hold that treaty. But Penn's sons didn't hold that, and so they had grievances that happened between the two. But Penn was a remarkable one that anybody could get along with because he loved them, he cared for them, he gave gifts to them, and then here he even bought land from those that could have been his enemies as he came into the territory, but he honored them. He had such a culture of honor.
We don't see that much in society today. I mean, this is what the Bible talks about when it says you are to love your neighbor as yourself. You know,
Yes.
I mean, William Penn did that. He practiced that. He made it a point to actually make a treaty saying that we
Right.
will love you.
So
And
he wrote the first frame of government, of all government, that we would have branches of government. We wouldn't have one monarch controlling everybody. We would have branches of government. It would keep everybody in check. So when he wrote the first frame of government for Pennsylvania, he wrote the Charter of Liberties for Pennsylvania. They were a model that other states used, and that as we were writing our US Constitution, there's a lot of quotes from Penn in that, because Ben Franklin went even to check with the Indians, the Iroquois Confederacy, to find out what all was in that agreement. So there was a model that he started, which is why that's the foundation of how governance was to be, and it was by the divine law of love of God, to love God and to love your brother, your neighbor. So he established all of this. That's at the foundation of what America was called to be. That's why I wanted to produce this film, that we would know that holy seed of a nation. And he had his quote back to his friends that's in our Capitol rotunda. It says, it's right around the top of the rotunda, everyone can see it coming in, "My God will make it, Pennsylvania, the holy seed of a nation, a holy example to the nations, for the nations want a precedent that we will do the thing that's wise and just." So what he planted was for Pennsylvania. It was he wanted a sovereign governance over the 13 colonies, and then when the United States, when the 13 colonies did the Constitution, then that was a big part of the model to them that they followed. And even the UN, you saw in the trailer, a UN official saying, we need to go back and remember what Penn planted for the Parliament of States, that God would be sovereign over all.
Yeah. I mean, this is marvelous stuff. First of all, where do people find the documentary?
Well, on Redeem TV, you can find it on there. You can find it on YouTube under Penn Seed, The Awakening. So you can live stream it a lot of different places, but originally it was Redeem TV that sent it out into different places that you could stream it from.
Well, it really speaks to us now in this day and time. I mean, when you consider the fact that we have such division in the country, and nobody talks about loving their neighbor like themselves. I mean, you love the people in your party maybe, but here it is, William Penn being told that he's going to encounter like real conflict when he gets to America with these people, and instead of him calling them savages, he says, no, they're not savages. You know, these are going to be my friends, and I'm going to love them. I'm going to show them love, and I'm going to love them.
So he's going to love his enemies.
Yeah.
What a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And then the enemies won't want to come against him.
Yeah.
And then there will be peace. He was establishing a peaceable kingdom where people of faith would be, of any kind of faith, would be able to live with that faith without any persecution. So Pennsylvania was to be a safe refuge for people to come from all over Europe. That's how all these Europeans got into Pennsylvania.
Wow. Well, if you live in Pennsylvania, you might know the name William Penn. Maybe you think he's the Quaker Oats guy or even the man on the top of City Hall in Philadelphia, but you probably didn't know much about the character and the deep faith of this extraordinary man. We'll continue our conversation with the producer of a powerful new documentary about the namesake of Pennsylvania, William Penn.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
William Penn might quibble with the idea that this beautiful Commonwealth was named after him. In fact, he said it was named after his father, a powerful man who cut him off from his inheritance, but before his death experienced the son's forgiveness. Abby, in this time of deep hatred and division, what are the lessons from Penn's own biography that point to hope?
Well, his lessons would be to love and not hate.
What changed him? What caused him to be that way? Was there a decision at some point that he made in his life? Tell me
Yes.
that.
There was a pastor, Thomas Lowe, that would visit with his family. And that pastor had a sermon that he said that changed everything for Penn. And that sermon was about there's a kind of faith that is overcome by the world. And there's a kind of faith that overcomes the world. Which kind of faith will you have? And I think that is so important for today, that are we going to sit back and be silent about what we believe and just let the world overcome what's happening to the believers? Or are we going to rise up and are we going to speak out and make a difference and be known as people of faith and live like that and make that attractive in how we live? He loved everybody. He cared for the people, but it was that sermon, that question, which kind of faith will you have, that made him say, I want a faith that will make a difference in the world, not just in how I live, but in what I would, even my writings, what I would say to others, and I even want to have a government that would be truly the government from the Creator God, and what He created us to do, that we would live out the created purpose that God had in our lives. And He certainly lived His out. So He is the holy. He's not just talking about a holy example. He lived as a holy example, and He was loved as that.
Yeah, that's a marvelous thing. Who in today's world, especially among the leadership that we have in the world, is trying to please God, right, is living in a way that says, I want God to be pleased with what I'm doing. God has gifted me to be in charge. I want God to be pleased with this. I want to show people by my example that I love other people, that I love them like I love myself. Mm-hmm. And Penn did this. I mean, what a marvelous example. I mean, he could have just lived a very rich, luxurious, or comfortable life in England, being his father's son and inheriting a lot of money and having a place in London and a summer place or a weekend place in the hills, as many of the wealthy royalty do in England. But he gave all that up, mm-hmm, to listen to God's voice, which told him what to do. And then he comes here to America, which was no easy thing back then. I mean, it was a boat ride. And then and he came here to wilderness that was already owned by other people, by Native Americans. And instead of viewing them as savages or coming at them in some kind of a contentious way, he said, you know what? I'll buy the land and I'm going to love you. And you're going to be my friend.
Yeah. The businessmen thought he was a terrible businessman. He wasn't looking out for making a profit for himself. He was looking out for caring for the people. So he didn't really make money on this. He in fact, it cost him a lot financially, but there's a legacy that he has that we're still living out today, and bring solutions today.
Knew even back then that whatever he had on this earth, he wasn't going to take with him. And he knew what true riches were. Right. So I think he was very, very rich in God's sight, even if he spent a lot of money while he was here.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. And
he was loved. He loved others, and they loved him back. So he was a wonderful example to all of us in how we should live.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Abildness, thank you for making this movie. Thank you for bringing alive a life we might only know by name. So thank you so much for what you've done. If you want to watch her movie, you can do it for free right now. Just scan the QR code on the screen at the end of this program. It's packed with life-changing truth. We'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
I don't think there's a better example of a historical figure for this particular moment in history. If we're very honest about what advice people are giving to people in politics and in government altogether, it is not meekness and humility. In fact, I hear a lot of people who say, we tried meekness, we've tried humility, and the other side, you fill in the blank who that is, just rolls over us. And I think what we're all experiencing is there's a lack of trust because there is a lack of a sense of that there's sincerity and good faith. It's an old term, of statesmanship and statescraft, that we really don't believe what the other side is saying. So could we try love? Let's see what love can do. Could we try loving our enemies, blessing those who curse you, and doing good to those who despitefully use you? And then what happens, as Scripture says, if you pray for them? Well, it changes the entire way that we approach them. Now, what I hear some people say, well, I pray for them, but I also fight them, one side, one the other, because what the other side is doing is evil. Well, remember, going back to what Abby was talking about, the king is describing the native peoples of this territory as savages. And that's just about the term that we use in politics for the other side today. So we're almost back to the same spot that we were at the founding of this extraordinary place, this experiment in love called Pennsylvania. So that's the story that we have lost, and it's a story we have to recover.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anybody, is there any paradigm that we can point to in modern day that's William Penn-like?
Yeah, people who are doing acts of goodness and kindness all over the Commonwealth, right? People in churches, in their private homes. What interrupts that, though, is the stirring in your heart that says, don't trust the neighbor with a political sign that's different. Don't believe anything that's coming out of their mouth. And we begin to assign motives, which destroys relationships, which destroys community. And then all those acts of goodness that we are prompted to do, we first ask whether or not they vote like us or think like us. That is not at all the example that William Penn provided. I think it could be transformative if we went back and looked at a life like William Penn's.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he didn't put any bounds on people. He just said, love them.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wonderful. Well, the founder of Pennsylvania once said, love is the hardest lesson in Christianity, but for that reason, it should be most our care to learn it. I know love may seem impossible, and it is if you're trying to do it apart from God's Spirit living inside of you. The good news is that God's Spirit and the power that comes with it is available to you. It's changed my life, and it'll change your life too. If you have questions or comments for me or for Jeff, please use the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'd love to hear from you. I'll read and reply to each message. For Jeff Coleman and the entire team here at Lighthouse TV, thanks for being with us tonight. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you again next week. William Penn's character is just wonderful.
It was a character that pointed to God's faithfulness. It wasn't in a business sense.